Oh, no. Man,
Yeah.
that's so funny. But,
Yeah,
it's so funny.
Yeah.
But
It
so
worked.
The world of televangelism was shaken when Joel Osteen, once seen as the face of modern Christianity, found himself surrounded by growing controversy. The smiling preacher who filled stadiums with hope and positivity was now facing questions about transparency, compassion, and truth. For years, his message of living your best life now inspired millions, but behind the glittering lights of Lakewood Church, whispers of discontent began to rise. From the Hurricane Harvey scandal to financial scrutiny, cracks appeared in the image of a man once untouchable. What followed was a storm that tested not only Osteen's reputation but the very foundation of his faith. The man who made hope a brand. Joel Osteen's story begins not with a fiery sermon, but with quiet determination behind the camera. Before he became one of the most recognizable preachers in America, Joel worked as a television producer for his father, John Osteen. He preferred the background, editing sermons, refining lighting, and perfecting the broadcast. But when his father passed away in 1999, Joel reluctantly stepped onto the pulpit, uncertain of his future. His soft-spoken optimism and focus on personal empowerment stood apart from the traditional preachers of his time. Within a few years, his magnetic smile and message of hope filled stadiums and television screens. Lakewood Church, once modest, grew into the largest congregation in the United States. Osteen's books topped bestsellers, and millions tuned in weekly for spiritual encouragement. Yet with fame came doubt. As critics questioned his sincerity, the world began asking, was Joel Osteen sharing faith or selling it as a brand? When the floodwaters rose. In 2017, when Hurricane Harvey devastated Houston, Joel Osteen's reputation faced its greatest test. As thousands of people fled their flooded homes, social media turned its attention toward Lakewood Church, a former basketball arena large enough to shelter many. Yet for days, the doors remained closed. Images circulated online showing the dry grounds of the church while nearby neighborhoods drowned. Outrage erupted instantly. Critics accused Osteen of hypocrisy, preaching compassion but failing to act when it mattered most. When the church finally opened, the backlash was unstoppable. Osteen explained that flooding near the property initially made access unsafe, but the explanation arrived too late. The damage to his public image was severe. For many, the man once viewed as a beacon of hope now seemed disconnected from the very suffering he spoke about. The Harvey controversy reshaped how millions saw his compassion and questioned the authenticity of his ministry. The empire built on broadcast Lakewood Church was never just a local ministry, it was a global production. Under Joel Osteen's leadership, his sermons reached over 100 nations, and his broadcasts attracted millions every week. The church's annual budget exceeded $90 million, and with that came scrutiny. Supporters viewed the scale as proof of divine success, an effective way to spread faith to millions. But critics saw something else, a church run like a corporation. Reports surfaced of massive spending on stage lighting, production sets, and promotional campaigns, while some questioned how much went toward helping local communities. Osteen defended his choices, emphasizing that he took no salary from the church, relying instead on book royalties. Yet the optics of wealth and faith sitting side by side made many uneasy. For all its success, Lakewood's image began to fracture. The pastor who once inspired universal admiration now stood at the center of debates about prosperity, authenticity, and purpose. The day the faith was tested, the hurricane controversy did more than spark headlines. It shook Joel Osteen's foundation. For the first time, his brand of positivity collided with raw human pain. Footage of people stranded outside Lakewood's gates during the crisis haunted the public's mind. Fellow pastors debated his actions on national television. Some defended him, claiming social media exaggerated the story. Others said it revealed how far he had drifted from the compassion central to Christianity. Inside Lakewood, whispers spread about leadership losing touch. Volunteers described a growing distance between church management and its members. congregants wondered if the mission had shifted from spiritual guidance to damage control. Osteen, always composed, kept smiling through interviews, but behind that calm surface, a man used to universal praise was facing a storm of disillusionment. The moment marked a turning point, not just for his image, but for how the world saw faith in the age of celebrity. Behind the smile. Joel Osteen's signature smile, once his greatest strength, became a source of suspicion. To millions, it was the face of unwavering optimism. To critics, it symbolized a man detached from reality. Known for avoiding conflict, Osteen often stayed silent during controversies, believing positivity would outshine negativity. But in crises, silence can amplify doubt. Insiders described him as deeply private, a man who internalized pain rather than confronting it publicly. Friends later revealed that behind closed doors, Osteen felt the sting of criticism deeply. He questioned himself, wondering if his message had lost meaning amid the spotlight. The pastor who preached resilience was now struggling to find his own. His reluctance to defend himself wasn't arrogance, it was fear that anger might destroy what hope had built. Beneath that polished demeanor was a man wrestling with faith, fame, and the fragile balance between being real and remaining inspirational. A divided congregation. The controversies surrounding Joel Osteen didn't just impact his reputation, they rippled through Lakewood Church. Some longtime members felt betrayed, leaving the congregation they once proudly supported. Others doubled down in loyalty, praying for their pastor and defending him as a misunderstood leader. The divide reflected a deeper tension. Could a megachurch remain genuine in its mission while existing under a global spotlight? Within church walls, prayer circles and private discussions grew intense. For some, Osteen's message still offered comfort and purpose. For others, it felt commercialized and distant. This period forced Lakewood to confront its identity. Was it a church or an institution? The controversy wasn't just about money or fame anymore, it became a spiritual reckoning. As Osteen preached about unity and forgiveness, his own congregation embodied both devotion and doubt. The questions of authenticity, humility, and leadership lingered in every pew, testing the faith that once seemed unshakable. The media's relentless gaze. The media turned Joel Osteen's life into a spectacle. Headlines alternated between praising his success and mocking his missteps. Television pundits and comedians painted him as both a saint and a salesman. Each appearance, each sermon became ammunition for a public debate. Social media amplified every rumor and mistake, creating a digital courtroom where millions judged his every move. Yet, Osteen never lashed out. He refused to argue with critics or respond to satire, insisting that staying positive was the best defense. Some saw this restraint as grace under pressure, others viewed it as calculated avoidance. The relentless exposure blurred the line between preacher and celebrity. What had started as a ministry of encouragement was now part of America's entertainment cycle. Through it all, Osteen continued to fill arenas, but the tone had changed. The message remained hopeful, but the man behind it had become far more complicated and far more human. Redemption in the storm, despite everything, Joel Osteen didn't retreat. He returned to the pulpit each Sunday, facing the same audience that had once questioned him. Instead of bitterness, he spoke about forgiveness, growth, and humility. Slowly, his transparency began to heal the wounds. Lakewood Church launched new community programs, offering aid to the homeless and disaster victims. Osteen admitted in interviews that the criticism had humbled him, forcing him to look inward and reevaluate his approach. He emphasized that faith isn't about being flawless, it's about perseverance and grace in the face of failure. The honesty resonated. Even former critics admitted that his willingness to learn from the past showed strength. Redemption didn't come through grand gestures, but through quiet persistence. In acknowledging his imperfections, Osteen found renewed connection with his followers and reminded them that even those who preach hope sometimes need it most. A legacy rewritten today, Joel Osteen's influence remains undeniable. His sermons still reach millions, and his books continue to inspire. But the man himself has evolved. The controversies that once threatened to end his career reshaped him into something more grounded, more self-aware. His polished image no longer shines with untouchable perfection. It carries the scars of experience. For many, that makes his message more real. Osteen's legacy now extends beyond success. It tells a story of resilience, grace, and endurance through doubt. He may never escape the questions about wealth, fame, and sincerity, but perhaps that's no longer his goal. The man who once built an empire on effortless optimism now preaches a deeper truth. Faith is not the absence of struggle, but the courage to face it. And in his most vulnerable moments, Joel Osteen finally became the example he always wanted to be,